Welcome to the Estonian General Intelligence podcast. And I have to say that I'm very excited today because our guest, Rainer Sternfeld, has been definitely one of the big influences and inspirations for me to start this podcast and start those conversations. And we'll get to the reason for that inspiration in just a second. But first, I want to say welcome.
Thank you, Lembit.
It is a real pleasure to have you over here. We'll have your full background and information and LinkedIn and everything like this on the podcast site and everything. But I would love to ask for you to go a bit over your background and discuss the different exciting things that you've done. The list is very, very long. When I was putting the list together and preparing for the discussion, I saw so many different activities, so many different directions that our conversation can take today. But maybe to get started, a brief overview from your side. What have you done and what has gotten you to this point, and what has been kind of the red thread going through it as well.
Mm-hmm. To kind of save time, maybe I'll generalize a little bit. I am quite happy that we're recording this at the Taltech Studios, which is my alma mater and where I started also as an engineer. While I was studying, I was recruited here to be a mechatronics engineer at the robotics lab here. So I've been building companies, teams, products, and communities all my life in different settings. The common thread has been technology and communities, building tools and systems, or providing means for people to express their best ideas, to connect with the best ideas. It's always been about using technology to bring the best out in people, and I think that's kind of like the common theme that you will be hearing when I talk about things. And then the other, common thread is probably introducing new ideas or new concepts or making, things happen. So kind of a lifelong entrepreneur in different settings. Started at Taltech, working on unmanned ground vehicles, UGVs, and more specifically on sort of the modularity of the kind of vehicles. That the first one was pretty much what you see today in the form of Starship. Obviously, at the time, we weren't building anything like that. It was testing of similar systems, modular systems, and then later on focused on the manipulators of unmanned vehicles for larger UGVs that would be EOD robots. So that's how it got started, and I was brought up in an interesting household where books and music and technology was surrounding me, and I grew up watching American and Finnish television when it was not always accessible to others in a small town called Saue, and my father was the one who put a lot of Finnish TV blocks into many people's TVs in the 80s. And in the late 80s, I was able to actually watch, any channel in the world thanks to a satellite TV system that he built himself from other parts. And so thus my world in that small concrete dwelling apartment was infinitely bigger than the world outside of my apartment. So that was kind of like the upbringing and the university years. And I came to university, to Taltech, because I wanted to study product development or architecture. That was my other choice. And specifically product development, because I was interested in how things get designed, how they are brought to market, who they're made for, how do you use them, how they're how they're engineered. All those questions interested me, and the only place where it was taught at the time was Taltech and at the mechanical engineering faculty. So it wasn't about mechanical engineering specifically that caught my attention. Today you can you can study that, if you're developing new food products or biomedical products and things like that. So, or IT, obviously. But at the time, that was the only discipline they were teaching this at. Later on, at university, I co-founded the student photography club, the student robotics club here, and while working and studying here, so this was my universe for quite a long time when I was a student. And later on, I joined my uncle to build a family company, which was a machining company, making specialized machine parts that were not able. At the time, the focus was to make things that you couldn't make on a CNC machine because there were quite many limitations at the time. And from there on, we got ABB as a customer, and so I started interacting with ABB. We made parts for wind generators, just the core, nothing else. And from there on, ABB recruited me into their low voltage systems factory, which is in layman's terms a switchgear factory. And there I started building a data platform that eventually was used all over Northern Europe, an end-to-end system. From there on, I was recruited by Bo Henriksson to be the head of business development for all Baltic states in ABB, and then we initiated a lot of different projects. So the electric car charging network that we have in Estonia was the first of its kind for fast charging in the world, nationwide. We built an innovation campus in Uri. We built a bunch of new businesses, service businesses. And in parallel, my friends and I, we started this product design studio called FlyDog, because we still wanted to create our own products and offered this as a service to companies that were thinking about bringing products to market. And this was the creative, the engineering, the product design part of me, because at ABB I was more on the execution side of things. And so there we had one project for the Taltech Marine Systems Institute to build a data buoy to be deployed in the Gulf of Finland to understand how phytoplankton moves. And so it's basically a robot in the water. And so that led me on the path that ultimately became Planet OS, which was a company I co-founded together with my other friends, and which I moved to California for 6 weeks after founding, I think. And that was a company focused on processing large-scale distributed data sets in Earth observation, and essentially a virtual database that would allow you to process very different kinds of data that generally doesn't work together. And that happened to be a unique idea at the time. So we filed for a bunch of patents, and then became the patent on methods for processing spatiotemporal data that is today cited by quite a lot of people. And then you get into this interoperability world, data integration, what you can do with the data, the accessibility of data. So the API-ification was underway, and this was a cloud-based platform. This was the first of its kind. And that, really launched us on the global scene, because initially this project was called Marine Explorer. And the idea was to build the product as fast as we possibly could, focused on still the enterprise as a customer, but enterprise would not provide you a quick way it wasn't providing a quick feedback loop. So what we did instead is we started connecting our service to public data repositories, so that it would make it easier to find, search, discover, access, and use publicly available, initially oceanographic data, later atmospheric and general environmental data. And so that became the hub for all marine professionals, in the next year or so. We had over 8,000 people. We were in Wired magazine. We were invited to participate at the World Ocean Council. I was a board member there for 3 years, working with a lot of large institutions or companies who were all figuring out post Mexican Gulf of Mexico oil spill how to react to those types of environmental disasters, and nobody had any tooling at the time because most of this stuff was not in the cloud. And so that kind of like a lot of different things happened, and United Nations had their SDGs ratified, so there was a solution summit where we presented. The White House initiated under Obama Open Data Roundtable, where I participated again with a group of fantastic individuals, how to make it simple to find and use publicly available data, which is common good. And so we built systems for NASA and NOAA. So a lot of this type of kind of work that helped to feed our product development, and this was all given away for free. And then in parallel, we would build the same system and we would offer and package the same systems to enterprises. And the biggest growth there came from wind farms. So sort of going back to where I started from with my family company in terms of wind farms, and ABB also still has in Estonia the largest wind generator factory in the world, just the generator piece. And then we built control systems, monitoring systems, real-time decision-making systems for wind farm operators. And over the course of, I think, 18 months, we had 160 wind farms using a Planet OS system called the Power Board. And then we had investors like RWE, which was at the time Energy and now part of E.ON, so one of the largest vertically integrated power companies in the world. And then we got acquired by Intertrust, which was coincidentally also one of our investors. And there I became head of data platforms division, offering a more sophisticated system to power companies around the world so that they can build their data-driven businesses in different verticals, whether it's smart homes or, again, solar PVs or wind farms or what have you. So that was kind of like the time where I started going to Japan quite a lot. I had been going already to Japan before that. I've been going to Japan since 2008. And then at Intertrust, I worked in the same room with the head of Japan of Intertrust. So for 2 years, I did that every day. And then I was in Japan every other month or so. And then this idea of NordicNinja was born, not initiated by me. I just received a call from my partner Marek Kisa. He says, "Hey, there's this idea," and we started talking about it. I just was an advisor at first, and then one thing led to another. They invited me to join as a partner, and so I did. After 8 years, almost 8 years in Silicon Valley, I returned to Estonia to join as a partner of NordicNinja. And NordicNinja is a unique VC fund in the sense that we are an operator, founder, engineer-led fund. There are not that many in Europe. Most of people who are VC partners come from finance background, which is fine, but I think you need to have balance. In Silicon Valley, it's about 60% of people who come from an operator background, and in Europe, it's less than 10%. So I think we're contributing to that. And then the second part is that we are the largest Japanese-backed VC in Europe with a broad range of institutional investors from finance, insurance, technology, retail, cosmetics, so forth. So and so we've been active now for 6.5 years, and I'm enjoying helping other founders to build and scale globally, avoid all the mistakes that I made, and I think in a very short time, NordicNinja has achieved more than I had hoped for, at least in the beginning. So this is kind of like a super fast crash course And in parallel, I have had other crazy projects as well. Like we founded a coding school for adults for reskilling and upskilling, and for them to be able to enter the world of tech or to improve their competitiveness. And so that has been a pretty big initiative, which started before COVID, almost immediately after I had come back to Estonia, and many other things like this podcast, Global Estonians, that I ran for 7 years as a gift to Estonian for its centenary. And then when I was younger and had infinite energy, then co-designed the Statue of Liberty, so to speak, or the statue for War of Independence, to put it correctly in Estonian terms, when I was 24. And so that was 60, it was erected 16 years ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a bunch of different things. And I think it's still all about technology and communities and expressing ideas.
Quite an impressive background and quite many things that you've done. I'm almost afraid to ask or get into like what's next, and I think that would be a very interesting conversation. But before going into a deep dive in some of the areas that we've discussed, and also the general topic of this podcast is kind of the coming AGI era, or the artificial intelligence and the impact into the societies and organizations, and also what role can Estonia play there. I did want to actually ask about your from the background. How much do you feel there was strategic planning in this path, or how much it was just taking on the great opportunities and ideas that as they came and developed?
I think that's a very, it's obviously an unplanned. All the things happened because of the position Estonia was in, my own family story. So you're kind of, I wouldn't want to say that, I had like a plan, but what I did have is, or what has remained constant, is this curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I think that curiosity has led me where I am today. And it's always also about people, like the lack of something in life, and you couldn't connect to different people, or this drive that I think all of us in Estonia had growing up in the Soviet Union, and particularly around the time where Estonia started to become free and finally became free, and then internet happened. So I think it's just not only once in a lifetime. It truly is a unique time in history for all of us on this planet. But if you're an Estonian and then you have like your own country, and then this is just a pretty phenomenal thing, and to be alive at this time, building a new country and witnessing, let's say 3 big waves, one being personal computing, whether in the form of a laptop, PC, or a mobile, then the internet, and now in the age of AI. I mean, that's a lot of change in one lifetime.
Absolutely. It has been quite an interesting ride. And I do have to say that to some of it, I do feel quite related to as well. One, obviously being Estonian and then having the same background and all of this. My path was a bit different. I actually left Estonia in 1990 and was gone for 10 years, and then came back in 2000. And then for a few years here, then to Ukraine, and then, most recently in Africa. But and also the one kind of comparison point or similarity is also that my father also designed the Finnish TV blocks for the friends and neighbors.
See,
so
we meet here.
Had that experience. He didn't go all the way to the satellites, but the great access to Finnish TV, and now from the different roles that you've had, engineer, entrepreneur, now investor, manager, being involved in larger enterprises, running smaller organizations, civic projects, what is kind of has been the closest to your heart, and what do you feel closest to right now? Obviously your role as an investor, but what are the things that you're kind of keeping your eye on? What are interests? What keeps you excited?
There are many questions in that. So what have I felt the closest to? I mean, that's hard. That's really that is really a hard one. I I think still it's Planet OS. I think it was a little bit. I mean, some parts, particularly the oceanography part, I think it was way ahead of its time. So it's not viable as a business in that way, at least. But I think we will come to this anyway. I think there is just so much that we can do for the Earth and for inhabitants of this planet with the right use of data. And I think that's still very close to me. So that's why I'm also involved in similar projects that are now, creating a more surgical set of tools in different domains. And then the other parts, I still want to say, I think the thing that really gets me the most excited is when I can combine some tools or technology with communities or bring it to communities. There are several projects I didn't mention as well, and they all have this common thread. I think that I believe in the creativity of people and in the ideas that people have, and you need to bring them closer together for them to exchange ideas, but then you also need to give them tools to express their best ideas. And when I look at the investments I've made also at NordicNinja, almost all have similar qualities. Somehow that's like you find yourself or you identify yourself with things that you get excited about, and you don't always immediately understand that this is the way it is. And what I'm responding with to your question is also something that if you had asked me this question maybe 6 years ago, or even when I had come back from the US, I couldn't have said it in that way, because it's all about pattern matching, and then only in hindsight you're able to recognize that, oh, this is what's happening. So that's definitely the case. The thing that gets me, is the most exciting for me right now. Is still the bigger picture for NordicNinja, which is that building a bridge between Japan and Europe, which we've been building, and I think it has been a tremendous success. So, I think in the last 2 or 3 years, you set out, you start doing things, and in the beginning, it's not so fast. It takes a lot of time, and of course, during COVID, it was not easy because we couldn't actually travel back and forth. But then you lay the foundation, and in the last, let's say, 2.5 years, we have had just phenomenal success in projects between our Japanese partners and the companies we have invested in. So that's quite exciting. Obviously, Code Yuffie is very exciting. How it's going global today. We're opening schools in Ukraine, in Kenya. We're opening satellite locations in Estonia. We have a school open in Finland, in Kuopio. So that's clearly growing, and that's very interesting. But there are some announcements which are still to come this year. So I hope that is also something I'm very interested to announce at some point. But it will be the same. It's the same pattern, meaning that you're giving tools to people to build something for themselves or for others. I mean, it's always one or the other. And of course, my family, our 2 children, they're growing up, so that's incredibly exciting. So in 3 years' time, they'll be graduating high school and middle school simultaneously. So that's another interesting thing to see how that's evolving, and obviously family is the most important.
Excellent. Now there are also many different avenues that I could take over here, but one that I would like to ask is when kind of looking at those different interests, what is quite impressive is not only being interested and kind of curious about those things, but actually bringing execution in many of the areas and actually bringing companies into fruition, having those successful projects, having successful integrations, bringing the Japanese investments into Europe, doing the civic projects, actually that we have the Statue of Liberty that's up and running, that we have the Code that's up and running, that we had the Global Estonians podcast and everything like this. How do you see the balancing the curiosities and interest with actual execution? And to make it even more specifically, now that when you're working with Nordic Ninja, when you're looking at the investors and companies coming to you, how do you actually evaluate that, and how do you assess their capabilities?
Mm-hmm. When you build something, you have to first be quite comfortable that you're not going to make it, that it's going to fail. And obviously, I've had way more failures than I've had successes. I like this. How was it? The basketball players, they go shots on goal. So, how many shots on goal have you made? And I think that's really the case. And so, yes, the things that you mentioned, I wouldn't say that they're successes, but yes, they're done. We executed on them. If I did it the second time over, I would do them differently or better, or at least try to avoid the things that where we made mistakes. But I think what you really need is cut through the noise and try to understand what's really important. It's much easier said than done. And I think the other thing that really helps, and since this is a podcast that people will be listening to and thinking about the future, I think that's the idea here. Then one key word in my life, not only career, but generally in my life, has been interdisciplinarity. This is really like a broad range of interests. You always invest in your skills, languages, understanding cultures, particularly if I think about, now the Japanese. So I've only worked in international settings. Even at Teltec, we had an international team. So it's always you try to connect. If everybody read the same book or listened to the same music, it would not be a good ground for unique ideas. So I think that's really the edge. But it's not only about edge. Who can be more competitive or something. It's also like finding out what's really true in the market. If you're an entrepreneur, the longer I do this, the more I think about obviously entrepreneurship as a sport, it's a competition, but it's also about imagining that you have a lock and I just need to find a key, and it's not about who finds the key first. It's like the right key, to become again number one. And I think that's true in life also. Like if you really want to be unique, you need to be interdisciplinary and it has to be something that you're truly interested in as a person. You can't fake it. So I might have these different interesting projects, but I also know what I'm not good at, what I'm not that I'm not interested in. So I don't deal with this stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. To continue, let's go a little bit about Nordic Ninja and connecting kind of Japanese cultures and European ideas, and having Estonians actually doing this. How do you see the combination of the three, and what are the key values that I have to ask what is the Estonian value that brings to the table, or how much is it even significant in this discussion?
Well, it's very significant. Obviously, everything that you do is an extension to your own minds and universe. People do these things. So a good blueprint for myself was when I was in the US. There's a fund called World Innovation Labs, or WIL, which is a bridge between Japan and the US. And obviously they have also invested in European companies, but the idea was to bring Japanese teams to the Bay Area, help them to figure out how the process works, bring them back to Japan, so it would kickstart the Japanese startup ecosystem. There was that, but then there were investments in great companies in the US. Also actually TransferWise or Wise, they invested in Wise. And so I had seen how this works, and when I first heard about this idea to build a similar partnership between Japan and Europe, and the original concept was about Nordics, Baltics, and Japan. So, and then it was very clear what we need to do because, well, the Nordics and the Baltics combined have fewer people than the Tokyo metropolitan area.
Mm-hmm.
So you have 8 countries that the total population is smaller than Tokyo. And then you kind of need to be very focused on the best of the best teams where you can invest in. And then you start asking yourself questions like, what are the similarities and the differences? So in my experience, I mean, the US and Japan are very close, not in ways that Europe are close and Japan. So, for instance, everything regarding consumer electronics or gaming or entertainment like music and movies, all this that happened post Second World War for historical reasons, but also for the reasons that unites these cultures. Again, it's an extension of how they think. Mm-hmm. And that elevated the world and made Japan who they are today. But then there's this other layer that it gets overlooked. I mean, it gets overlooked because it's kind of decidedly a little bit boring and not for everybody. And this is the kind of the R&D of industrial products and systems. So when we talk about music, we talk about the music, but when we want to talk about mediums, then it's CD. And so CD is an co-invention of Philips and Sony. Mm-hmm. I've been to the facility where it was created and the whole story, how things are made. That's very interesting. So the mindset of how R&D gets conducted is very similar in Europe and Japan. So that's one. Then there's this kind of the work ethos and the moral compass is much closer in Europe to Japan than the US and Japan. When you just think about the Nordics, Baltics, then of course the closeness to nature and design ethos and all those types of things are super mm-hmm. close. So then that is something that's untangible, but it comes out in partnerships, in discussions, in decision making. In dinner parties, mm-hmm. like mm-hmm. This comfort in silence, or how do you talk about objects or language, structure of language, things like, for instance, Finnish, Estonian, and Japanese, they're all phonetic languages. So again, I've been studying Japanese for a couple of years now, and it's so much easier for us to pronounce words than it is for English people, for instance. So there's a lot of things that just make sense when you start working on these things, and then it scales. Mm-hmm. That's the interesting piece. It's not just some sort of a project, a niche project. It's something that actually scales because their foundations are so close to one another. And the other reason why I think NordicNinja also works is that the other projects that have been either 100% Japanese and then some Westerners have been invited, or vice versa. It's been like a Western initiative and then some Japanese have been invited. There hasn't been enough skin in the game on both mm-hmm. sides, or sort of there's no you need to have the components that you need to need one another. That's pretty much the easiest description. That the Japanese needed us and we needed the Japanese to create something like this, and I think everybody in Europe knows, or everybody around the world knows, Japanese craftsmanship and how particularly thorough they are, mm-hmm. and how they think about product quality so differently from us. So for them, product quality is all about not disappointing other people or the user, and so that means that if the user is not wrong, that if the user abuses a product, then the product still holds. Whereas what we think is that you just don't want the product to break so that somebody doesn't call you with maintenance issues or something. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. It's a very different mindset, and so that means that our products in Europe tend to be more complex in order for them to work, but it works beautifully if you follow the manual. But the Japanese product works even when you abuse it, that is not the same for all categories, but for most of this, it's like that. And if you try to figure out why things work the way they work, then you can figure it out by thinking about cultures. So it's there are a lot of layers, and I've been, as mentioned, going to Japan since 2008, and so I spent a fair amount of time living in the U.S. and worked a lot with Japanese. Obviously, I'm European, and so you can't say that you understand the Japanese mind fully, but I think it's you don't need to understand it fully in order to work together well.
Okay, excellent. And once again, many different areas that I would like to go into here, but maybe we'll turn the page a little bit and go a bit more into the technology. And when you're looking at the investment landscape and the technological landscape, how big of a change or the wave has been? The AI discussion obviously big, but now the AGI discussion, or just actually yesterday I was looking at the presentation and Jan LeCun said that, let's start using the AMI, advanced machine intelligence, rather than the artificial general intelligence. So it's definitely many changes, many aspects, but how do you see that in the investment landscape, and how is it coming to your table?
Yeah, I mean, when I was building Planet OS, we received already then quite a lot of questions about this. That hey, what if you would use more machine learning, deep learning? That was the theme at the time, and one of our investors was Jan Tallinson. When talking to him, he was already involved with topics of existential risk and so forth. So in my mind, this has been already on the table for at least a decade. But in the world of investment, you always build for the future, and your fund, you're looking at what happens in the next 10 years or 15 years. But not all the pitches are. I mean, I guess I've been, desensitized to the extent that most of ideas are not that bold or not that exciting or not that crazy. They all seem very rational, and it's mostly about execution. Can you actually make it happen? Let's say this way: there are very few ideas that are really like mind-blowing. Most ideas are just an incremental step to the next thing, and then you start to think about, okay, what are the real things that accelerate or slow down technology? And right now we are clearly living in an acceleration mode where, let's say, the last 10, 15 years, capital has been wildly available. Capital is a fuel for executing on new ideas. Globalization is a fuel for accelerating in executing ideas. Freedom of movement. Obviously, that's another one. Even though you have internet and you can build a lot of stuff, it's still that people can go to meet different people and work together. So you have these different things, and so you ask yourself, what happens if you turn all this to zero? So there will still be development in somebody's basement, in somebody's garage. It's just that it might, propagate more slowly in terms of, human lifespan. But in general, it still continues. So it's like this type of let's say a physical process that you have to extrapolate and think, okay, you add some more fuel, so it burns faster, so it happens faster, and then you decelerate you cut off resources. It just happens super slowly, but it still happens. So, and I think that's when you start talking to people like Jan Tallinson, and you start thinking about like, where is this going to go, and do we have control over it at all or not? Do we live in a simulation? Like, is this going through these different motions, and we just are observers, So it's an interesting philosophy. It can get very dark very fast.
But very, very, very light.
Yeah.
There is a strong case for abundance and those aspects as well.
Yeah, exactly. And there are enough resources. There are enough resources for everybody on this planet. You could argue that, but again, if you play out all the different variations all at the same time, I think that's where the different scenarios, it's impossible to foresee how it will be playing out. Because there are the timelines collide. You have climate crisis and migration, and you have energy problems, and you have wars, and then who has control, and then there's technology, and it's always been about rules and tools. As what's his name now, Rutgers Bergman. He wrote this book called Humankind, and so like all the progress, he makes a case that humans are actually good in essence. So he believes in the human good, but then the whole book looks at also how people have built different tools and different rules. So it's rules meaning law, for instance. How do we follow the laws, and we agree on different things, and then we build some specific tools without which we couldn't have had this conversation or record this or share this with others. So I think when you're an investor, you think about these types of things in the broader sense. But then when it comes down to an actual decision, you look at the people, are they able to execute? You look at the business model. You look at a much shorter time horizon, and that's what I think is happening right now. That on one hand, you have the ability to start a company by yourself or with 2 or 3 friends that becomes a $1 billion company just with the 3 or 4 of you. Or Sam Altman likes to talk about this one-person unicorn, right? So that's clearly on one hand, and on the other hand, if we really wanted to change something for the better, we need to build serious systems that are physical systems, that are software-driven systems, obviously, but are nevertheless physical systems. So then we talk about energy as a big challenge for the world. We talk about food security, we talk about things like that. And then we talk about tooling that is very niche and very narrow and very small amount of people would understand, but at the same time, everybody would benefit. So the themes, you could see there's big themes, big by size and capital and amount of people that it requires. And on the other hand, when you just use LLMs and packaged tools, you can build a $1 billion company just by yourself, sitting here in Mustamäe.
But this is to follow up on. You said that you look at the 10-year plans and things like this. For me, it's actually a question my advisor worked, and I'm actually having a hard time laying out the vision for the next 3 years or 5 years. What is happening technologically? What will happen with LLMs? What will happen with the new technologies? What will happen with the agentic systems and all of this? Of course, it goes in waves. There are some setbacks. There's a lot of discussions right now that the LLMs are not as good as everybody's been promoting them, but there are already new technologies coming out, the new aspects coming out, and how do you balance that? And that the technological curve is kind of speeding up, and the exponential growth of AI and AGI systems and all of this. At the same time, humans are fairly slow in their reaction, and human systems and human organization take their time. How do you see the balance there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the difference between when we say AI today, most people think about large language models. Fewer people think about machine vision, computer vision, and that has been around for a long time, and that's where I started here in this building. But because regular people don't use machine vision in that way, and then can't interact with that in the same way like we interact as humans. Again, languages are sight is important, hearing is important, but language is such a powerful concept. So that's why this is like the age of AI and we can build different things. I how do I say? I think this wave of large language models, obviously, with the advent of ChatGPT, it will have its own limits because all the data that we had to train these models will be, consumed, so to speak, or fed into the training, and so then you'll need to figure out other ways, and you will see commoditization of not just models, but specialization and commoditization. People will learn how to use them in all kinds of ways, and it will become better. You will train it, and it will be very cool. I think it will be very interesting. Where it will go in the same direction like all technology. And I will use. I remember I watched this documentary, or was it a mini series, I think, during COVID with Bill Gates on Netflix, and then he was asked, I don't even remember the exact wording of the question, but it was a question about what is he excited about, or like where is the world going, or things like that. And he said optimization, and it's really like a physics type of a process where all the energy that you need to perform a particular task is being optimized for. If you follow how nature works, just look at the weather system, it follows the same optimization path, and here's the same thing. So if we would all use LLMs in the way they are powered, and today it's like using, I don't know, it's like using the F-35 to go and get some milk from the store. Mm-hmm. It's completely insane. It's not sustainable. And so what will happen with these types of systems is that they will have to start learning same way as biological systems. This is, again, going very mm-hmm. quickly to this part where people talk about, do we live in a simulation? Because it's very easy to see, okay, the ideal version of this is the most ideal version of what we can imagine in our heads is an expression of ourselves, of mm-hmm. our human brains, neural nets. So a baby is born, they don't have a training data other than DNA. So it's like very limited, but they will figure it out. And today's LLMs, or any system that you will see, they come with a lot of data. They will come with already predefined software, so they already do something, but they're not able to learn mm-hmm. in the same way as humans do or other animals do. So what you will see is systems that are deployed, so basically AI on a chip, and they will have to start learning by themselves. You throw them into an environment, and at first they will be as helpless as a baby. Mm-hmm. And another system that comes preloaded, they might do something, but they hit a limit very quickly. And so then you will have an AI system that runs on low energy, but is much more scalable over the long term. Mm-hmm. And that's what you will see. That these are the systems that you will see coming, but that's not a question of the next 2 or 3 years. That's a question of like 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm.
Which is still a quite short period of time.
It's still a short period of time. And then even in that period of time, their tasks will be also limited, because you will mm-hmm. still be limited by hardware. So again, like biological systems are by far superior. And that's why we are going to be probably seeing, if we, use this AMI term, so AMI combined with human intelligence, I think that's where you will see quite a lot of advancement. And mm-hmm. I think that's where the danger lies, at least in the next, I don't know, that's hard to say, but let's say in the next 50 years, that's what you will see. Mm-hmm. I mean, never say never, but I have a very hard time imagining a physical process where AMI becomes so powerful that it consumes all of planet's energy, that this has to destroy it. And I have a very hard time that this will happen in the next 50 years. Of course, when you talk to people like Jan Tallinn or read literature, it's like, oh, this is around the corner. Basically, start digging a hole. So it's a very hard simulation to crack, in my opinion, and you can easily prove me wrong, probably. Mm-hmm. But just knowing human nature, just have a very hard time seeing that happen in the next, let's say, 50 years is a long time. I mean,
but there are
50
also the more optimistic views. Like
Yes,
Ray
absolutely.
Kurzweil and I
Absolutely.
keep every podcast. I think I bring
Yes.
out that Peter Diamandis and
Yes.
his work and other kind of futurists and visionaries. And for me, actually having a discussion about AGI and what the significant change is, and what is kind of making me uneasy to make any predictions, is a kind of a combination of at least three things. One is that I see that AI's technology is advancing significantly. We all feel how the kind of the arms race of ChatGPT versus Claude versus Grok and all of this, how much speed and capability is being added daily to the language models. And the second part is how much humans are actually becoming more effective and powerful and efficient. I know in my everyday work, it's like how much I'm already depending on ChatGPT as my business partner, as my creative partner, as my coach in the different discussion preparation for this podcast. Having your background within 15 minutes, 30-page document that I can read through and that provides me not only the data, but a very good insights and organized in a way that I can actually come into the conversation feeling like I almost know you, which I don't. And that's the other part of it, is actually adding the capability, the human capabilities. So in one hand, we have the technology tools that we can use to improve the life and become more efficient and optimize things and everything like this. We're becoming much more powerful and efficient ourselves. And the third part is actually applying that efficiency to the discovery and the science, and actually learning new things. And LLMs being quite strong in math, not all the areas of math, from what I understand, but still quite significantly. And math being, now I'm saying ABCs, but math being the language of science, and the acceleration that is becoming to the scientific research. So from those three areas together, it's quite difficult for me to say that what's going to happen tomorrow or day after tomorrow, or maybe 3 to 5 years, yes. But after that, that is actually quite an interesting concept. And then coming back, of course, how do we change our institution? How do we change our systems? How do we change our laws? How do we change our adaptability to the technologies and other things related?
I'm reminded by this sentence that was used by physicists and in the scientific community in the 20th century, that science is advanced one funeral at a time, which means that basically somebody had come up with some amazing concept, and they were so stuck in that concept that they were unable to see what comes next. And so when they pass away, then the younger generation comes and they don't care about the previous world. They care about the future. And I think it's the same for AI a little bit, in the sense that the adoption of AI, the adoption of these tools, when you look at what 15-year-olds are able to do with this stuff, their mothers and fathers create this technology, and then they use it, but they use it in a completely in the most complete and pure way, and I think that's in a way that currently the generation that creates these LLMs, they don't even imagine how it will be used completely if everybody were to use it at the fullest level, and that is in itself like hindering quite a lot of progress also, but it also is keeping a lot of bad stuff from happening. So we need this generational, and we need this life cycle to take place, to test out different and hash out different ideas and what works and what doesn't work. And so when I think about Ray Kurzweil, which is what actually his book Transcend was, something that actually put me on this kind of, I don't know, again, an acceleration path from being just a robotics engineer or a family company CEO, and I was at the ABB actually at the time. I think when I discovered it from Steve Jurvetson interview, then that put me on a completely different path, and I had an aha moment. And so I think the young people, they want to create a better world, but you always inherit the world from your parents and grandparents, and so the question is how much you can change. And the physics or the scientific sentence that I said in the beginning, that gives me quite a lot of hope that the younger generation will overcome a lot of these challenges that we are unable to. So we are creating problems that we are unable to solve, that the next generation will have to solve, and other people will have to get out of the way in order to actually solve them, because we are limiting ourselves in a lot of ways. So I don't know if that makes sense, but I think about this quite a lot when you invest in a company or work with a team and you're looking at, what's the limiting factor here? And it's always people. It's always people. If we always had this constant level of energy, constant level of curiosity, we won't talk about, let's bring young people in. It would be, obviously there are exceptions. There are some people that have constant amount of curiosity, constant amount of energy, and constant amount of intellectual honesty towards themselves so that they can build new things. But that's not the case with 99% of society. So we need young people to come in and solve the problems that we created.
Excellent. Now, as I said in the beginning, there's so many different areas to go into. And I did want to take a bit of a shift in the conversation over here and come to one topic that when we had a conversation preparing for the podcast, you said that one of the weaknesses, but I'd kind of reframe it, that one of your passions is ocean. And you just said also that Planet OS is still very close to heart and the topics that you were dealing with over there. And for me, it's also interesting that, it's somewhat a cliche that, we're doing all this space exploration. At the same time, it's like 80 to 95% of the oceans that we haven't really discovered or we don't know. And it was very interesting to hear from you the aspect of kind of the energy storage capability and also at the same time the very delicate systems. Maybe you can expand on those topics a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the oceans are the final frontier for humans because it's way easier to go to space. It's way easier to imagine ourselves in space. Humans don't live in water. We can't survive in water without significant effort, and therefore it's very hard to imagine ourselves doing anything there that will really help us to understand. And at the same time, the oceans are this huge heat reservoir. So the heat capacity of the ocean is a good measure of how crazy the climate crisis can become. You use that in formulas. Oceanographers use that in formulas to try to understand where things are going, and in both with acidification of the ocean, which will lead to extinction of many species, but then also ocean heat content will give climate scientists a way to understand what will happen in the next year, 5 years, 10 years. Because if you pump a lot of hot air into the atmosphere, I mean, bad things will start to happen in different places in the world, and side by side you can have freezing temperatures or fires. So it's a weird physical. It's a physics-based kind of process, and but the oceans are this. I don't know, but the right way to explain it is this absolutely beautiful ecosystem, very complex ecosystem that has happened over a very, very, very long time. And so there is this balance, very, very delicate balance of life processes in there. And so I think that's what I'm drawn to. I'm very curious about that. I think, of all the people that popularized this, like Jacques Cousteau, and if it wasn't for his shows, we wouldn't have a whole generation of marine biologists. And I'm hopeful that this will be rediscovered, and somebody will really be able to find the right language, the right narrative to bring people back to the oceans, which is a positive narrative. Not only that, hey, we have a lot of microplastics, which is true. It's just really, really a big problem, and so actually that reminds me of like, what am I interested in? It's again technology and communities. So oceans, or let's say microplastics, it's like an ownerless problem. And we have a handful of ownerless problems on this planet, which need a positive narrative for people to care. People don't respond well to doomer language that, oh, we're gonna blow up. Okay, fine. So we need a positive narrative that we actually believe in, so we can take care of this. And for me, the ocean is just such a beautiful place that gives us life. It gives us oxygen, saves us from all the other stuff, and not only just functionally that, oh, I can breathe, or it's just it's like, you're not in traffic, you are traffic, this sort of stuff. And then humans used to, if you look at cities around the world, we like to live nearby water. So our connection to water is very close, but we somehow are really distancing ourselves from it, and are unaware what's going on. Some nations are obviously better at this than others, but still. So I am very interested in the oceans, and I think that perhaps one day I will return to some project that is related to that.
Yes, it's an interesting thing, the ownerless problems, and for me, it's always fascinating that in many cases, the technological solutions or scientific solutions to those problems are there. It comes down to actually business or politics, that it's just not cost effective or advantageous to solve those problems. And I'm kind of optimistic that once certain problems get big enough or difficult enough not to ignore, that there will be a resolution. But of course, I'm hopeful that we'll get into the more proactive mode soon, and the technologies and actually the free time that we'll have when agents will do more of the work and robots will do more of the work, and all of this will enable humanity to focus on starting to solve some of the problems that we've created, and kind of reminding ourselves that we're actually part of the system, that it's not the remote issues at hand.
Yeah, and I'd also like to add that we shouldn't forget that biology and nature itself is a self-healing system, and it does provide us with a lot of solutions that we are avoiding today, and that we don't always account for biological processes when we create human-made tools to solve something. So I think this will be the future, where biology and technology will work hand in hand. It will be better than technology alone or biology alone, and because a lot of the problems that we are facing right now will be even amplified up until the point where population reaches like 10 billion, which is forecasted to happen at 2050-ish. And so, that means for the next 25 years, we'll see more mouths to feed, more demand for the same resources. And so that's again going back to optimization. So, and we are seeing already a lot of optimization. I mean, look at the lights that we use, or, like the amount of energy we use for a thing is being reduced all the time. But there are some elements of our life that we cannot do only with technology, that has to be done hand in hand with biology. And so if we embrace that, I think we can solve a lot of problems.
Absolutely. And I'm going to try to make one more segue and kind of the screeching turn of the wheel. And when we're talking about the different issues, and I was currently or previously a bit blunt about the fact that there's not a business case to change things and all of this. I think the specter of activities and interests that people have is quite wide. And one thing that impressed me when I was listening to your podcast, the Global Estonians, and the conversations that you had were actually the different stories of the people and the focus and interests, and actually also the impact and change that they made. Could you reflect on this journey? What were some of the most unique discoveries that you made yourself? What impressed you the most, and how it changed you as a person having had those 100 conversations?
Oh wow, that's
as I said, turning the wheel and screeching.
It's hard to say something that doesn't sound like a cliche, because it truly is that every human has its own universe inside them, and so particularly because we're talking about Estonians here, the guests that we had, they're all amazing people, and we generally don't, there's just so much to learn from them, and they don't market this. They just go ahead and do things, and all Estonians are super busy because there are so few of us, so we need to sit on, one person needs to sit on 10 chairs just to field all the functions of one country. And so I think the learning for me is just ask people. Ask people what they do, ask people what they think, and I think that's you will always find something that you didn't know before, which shouldn't be a surprise. We all knew this, but at the same time, if you are in an everyday situation, and this doesn't apply only to Estonians, but we tend to talk about people like as labels. I guess that's what I've been trying to avoid all my life. I'm evading these types of labels. I try to talk about what I like to do, like people or technology or communities and technology, and I can apply that to different things. And if I study hard and if I'm interested in particular disciplines, then I can figure out the tooling for that. And so I think we had doctors, we had conductors, we had obviously engineers, we had entrepreneurs. We had a lot of different people, and artists, and like it's just again, what amazed me is the range. I guess, I mean, maybe this is a very Estonian thing, or a thing that small nations possess, that you have to have people that are interdisciplinary, or that are able to do many different things. You cannot specialize in a very narrow field. Although there were people that were specializing in a very, very narrow field also, but their upbringing was such that it wouldn't be possible for you to specialize unless you had some sort of a interdisciplinary upbringing. So this was really eye-opening. Every time you spoke to somebody, you'll start to see these, that your original preparation is good, but you still discover so many new things about a person. And I tend to be a person who likes to prepare or be thorough, just so I want to respect the other person's time, or not to limit. But then you still learn something completely new. So I think this is the endless story. You just need to ask and you learn. Yeah.
Excellent. Now, looking to the future, I'm not going to ask you a question, where do you see yourself in 10 years? But if you would kind of envision this conversation of global leaders in 10 years, is there a conversation that is not being had today that you see that will become more significant and more important, that should come to the table now?
A conversation that's not had today. That's a hard one to answer. I feel like there are a lot of conversations that are being had. So it almost feels like everybody's talking, right? And it's a world that cannot stop talking. I mean, if I think about what kind of disappoints me in these conversations or in a world that never stops talking is the lack of action. There's a lot of talking, particularly in Europe, and there's a historic reason for that. But again, I think we always forget, in Europe particularly, we forget that, or at least it seems like by talking, we want to cover 99% of our bases or something like that. And instead, maybe you could get, you could be much better at doing the right things, focus on those things. So do the right things and not worry about doing them perfectly. So this whole mindset of iteration, and I think that's what the Americans are much better at. They tend to focus on the right things, even though they're not, perfect, but they're moving quickly. And some of these solutions, and again, like if you have lived in these different places or visited, I haven't lived in Japan, but I've visited enough so you can see how people operate. Then you start seeing where the world is going, and I think that you have to look past the news headlines. And there are so many phenomenal people everywhere, but we are so limiting ourselves. And so I think particularly for Europe, if we want to, at least the Europeans tend to eventually do the right thing, but we want to make them perfectly right out the gate, whether it's
and in harmony.
In harmony,
yes, that everybody agrees
exactly.
And everybody sits at the table and all the different backgrounds.
That's
and things
right.
Like this.
Yeah, and so, but there's like a lot of there's a lot of data on European founders going to the US to execute their ideas because that's where you can express those ideas. And I think, that's the opportunity for Europe now. Imagine if you had all these folks stay in Europe and we actually had an actual digital single market, which we don't. It's just on paper. It's a pipe dream. If we actually had that, then that would be kind of, a very powerful thing. And I think you can create a US-like federation without the potential fallbacks of what everybody is afraid of here in Europe, because we have inherently already different languages and cultures that can be in place, I think. So what's not discussed is that, are we doing the right things? Are we moving fast enough? And there's just so much talking and maybe again, intellectual honesty. I'm not admitting that, hey, like how many people say like, hey, I made a mistake, or like, or being okay with making a mistake. So it's just, whether it's, war in Ukraine, whether it's an energy problem, whether it's investing in startups, there's too much, like in Europe, there's just too much talking.
Yes. For me, it's also, there are a few things. One is, I don't know how we could make that transformation, but I think if humanity could get into the more optimist, more positive side and seeing the things that are good and then seeing the things the great opportunities that we have and actually not only great opportunities that things are actually getting much better. I think the discussions, it's really hard a discussion to have here right now with the war in Ukraine and then the situation in Middle East and things like this. But there is some value in the statistics that there's never been a more peaceful time and all of those aspects. And also looking at the technological developments and the capabilities through AI, AGI that's coming to the world and things like this. So how do you get the conversation into the more positive side?
Yeah.
And the other part of it for me is really that I think the conversation really understanding the impact that the AMI, the machine intellect, coming to the table as a partner, as a kind of new accelerator of the conversation, can have. So those things are actually quite interesting. Now, I do have to ask and just use this opportunity as this is the third episode that I'm recording, and you have this great experience from recorded 100 episodes. Not directly, what is your advice? But are there topics that we could cover? Are there aspects that we could handle? Is there a question that I haven't asked?
One thing that I think is important is when I was recording my podcasts, then obviously I asked a bunch of different, what are your book recommendations and things like that. And LHV co-founder Andres Wiesemann had this one recommendation, which was not a book, but which was a podcast slash, media outlet called Monk Debates, which is a website dedicated to hosting debates, arguing, very difficult problems for and against. And if you want to understand a particular problem, you have to have like all parts represented so that you can form your own opinion and find the truth. Otherwise, it's too one-sided and not all things are covered. And so when we think about AI and the future, then I think, you should cover all the positive and the negative sides. But also, I think I alluded to this earlier, that it's also generational. So I would recommend to bring in younger people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's like another form of an argument, not just doomsday scenario and super optimistic scenario, but like generational scenarios and where things are going. And there's a time scale. We can talk about 50 years, but we can also talk about the next 3 years. So I think these are interesting things. And then if you really zoom out like to a cosmic scale, what happens then? Because I think that's also. So try to create a map of sorts. Like I always find it very helpful when I've created like a landscape for myself, so I know how to navigate better.
Absolutely. Thank you. With this generational thing, I actually had a bit of a deja vu moment the other day. And that was when I was listening to Sam Altman. I believe it was his TED Talk, or at least one of the interviews. And he said that when they look at the usage statistics of how people use, and there is a clear generational gap, that the older people, 30 plus, 35 plus, they're using it as an extended Google to get better answer on all of this. In between, it's kind of a partner / Google, but young people, it's really kind of life partner, coach, not making any decision without having a discussion with ChatGPT first. So this is kind of interesting thing. And where the deja vu moment was that in 2000s, early 2000s, I had a conversation, or I saw a speech by Linnar Viik, who is one of the fathers of Estonian Digital Society and then very, very significant influencer on making sure that it happened. So he brought an example that, we older people say that we go to internet. Younger people don't have that concept. So I was like, that's kind of a full circle.
Yes.
And it's happening. And it's absolutely, that's a good advice to bring in. And this is one thing that I've been a bit hesitant to, this is a step that I need to take to bring in more adversarial views as well. But this is definitely something that's in the picture. And for me, this project, it's been kind of a natural progress that I thought it's a great idea. I had some discussions about, the value of English language podcast, about the Estonian experience as a digital society, the changes that the AGI is bringing, and then having conversations with the people that have influenced technological aspects, influenced societal aspects, and just very cool people to have discussions with. So from that standpoint, and having the inspiration from the Global Estonians podcast for sure. So I think that kind of brings it to full circle. I really want to thank you for being the inspiration. I want to thank you for this conversation, and I hope this is not the last one that we'll have. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lembit.